order to be powerful, you just really have to be centered in who you are at your best.
You got a pillow if you lost yours. You got a seat at my table. You got a here's somebody who believes you. And let truth remind you. You've always got a place to go to. You got a home.
Welcome to The Creator's Journey. I'm your host, Charles Gupton. Fears and obstacles on the journey of creation are things we all face. Every creator who works from the heart faces the same challenges. You are not alone. In each episode, I talk with creative leaders about the mindsets and processes they use to push through their struggles to create and put their work out into the world in order to make a difference. If creating an impact is something you're struggling to achieve at this point in your life, and you believe the encouragement and feedback of a trusted group of creative leaders could make a difference in your growth, I have a solution. I'm leading 2 Impact Accelerator mastermind groups to help a select number of creative leaders achieve objectives that are simply not possible working alone. If you're interested in building a new body of work based on renewed creative energy and deep encouragement to grow, please let me help you do that. Contact me at charlesgupton.com. And thanks for joining me on this journey.
Here's the key to my front door. You got a pillow if you lost yours. You got a seat at my table. You got a home. Here's somebody who believes you. Let truth remind you. You've always got a place to go to. You got a home.
Kelly Fredrickson is a fireball of energy, enthusiasm, and encouragement in her role as Senior Vice President in Marketing for Bank of America, as she leads creative teams to produce work that drives a consistent brand voice in all communications, as well as throughout the customer experience. But at the same time, she is also a cool balm of support for the people and the teams that she leads, as she takes care of the essential elements that sustain and grow their capacity to be even more impactful through their creative contributions. In addition to her current role working on the client side of the advertising relationship, she has also spent many years working on the agency side as well, for Modernista, Holliday, and Heater Advertising. But after a 28-year career in advertising and marketing, Kelly hit a wall and found herself asking the question, why is this not working for me anymore? She wanted to dig deeper, and with the support of her boss, she enrolled in a yearlong certificate class in positive psychology at Kripalu Whole Being Institute. The work she did through that program laid the foundation for a bigger life project called My Year of Whittling. It is a process of cutting away what doesn't matter in your life so that you can focus on what does. Welcome, Kelly.
Hi, Charles.
And yes, I want to be long-term pen pals with you. I have thoroughly enjoyed reading your blog posts and emails and have looked forward to this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you. I have as well. I'm so glad you agreed to be my pen pal because I love writing letters, and I'm glad to have a new person to write and receive letters from. This is such an honor. Thank you for including me in your conversations.
Well, and for me. I want to jump into your experiences out of your year of whittling in just a moment, but before we do, I want to get you to talk a little bit about your formative years. I've really enjoyed, as I said, reading your blog post, and it seems fitting that we step back and get you to talk a little bit about how your family, your grandfather, grandmother, aunts, parents, siblings, the whole lot, how they carved and shaped the person, the parent, creator, and leader you've become.
Oh, thank you for letting me start there, Charles. Family is so important. And, I talk about my family a lot. My mom and dad grew their family by adopting my siblings. I had a sister, Shauna, who died of cystic fibrosis when she was 7 and I was 9. And when she was diagnosed, my parents made the decision to not have any more biological children and to build their family by adopting. So for a long time, it was Shauna and myself and Danny, and and then they adopted. I'm also the only white child in my family because my mother and father learned that it was much easier and quicker to build a family if you didn't stipulate that you wanted a white baby with blue eyes to sort of match the daughter that was in your home. And so that's how they built our family. And I thought all families look like our family until we moved to another town, and no families look like our family. But
yeah, that was amazing for that time.
Yeah, I know.
That's more common now, but a number of our friends have done that. But that's unusual for that period of time. It seems.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, my parents did a very nice job of making sure that that there was a network and community of families that looked like ours that we saw very often. And, we were very active in the Unitarian Church in Duxbury, Mass. And, very sort of welcomed there. And, as we grew up, I sort of learned that we were a unique family. And I think it's probably, definitely the death of my sister was a huge sort of formative point for me. And that my brothers and sisters, just like anyone's family, sort of they influence who you are. I'm the oldest, so I have that oldest role, But the other very strong influences in my life were my mother's father, my maternal grandfather, who I write about. I've written about him a couple of times on the blog, and he was just this awesome character who. I got my love of letter writing, probably my love of writing from him. He used to stuff, 6 and 7 pages with Mimeo in the typewriter and write one letter and then send it to 7 of us, So you'd get this crazy letter that was meant for Aunt Kay about all kinds of news that had nothing to do with you, but it was kind of a look into him.
That's so funny.
And my dad's mom was this just incredible lady that was so ahead of her time and really always encouraged me to be who I wanted to be. And I think that's the thing that, I want to give my kids that my parents and those 2 grandparents gave me was that that feeling that you can be and do whatever it is you set your mind to. And as long as you, go into it with your whole heart, you'll be able to accomplish it. And that's just, that was a gift, and I don't think everybody gets that.
No.
And I want to give that to my kids.
Wow.
Thank you for asking me that, Charles. It was an unexpected start.
Well, it's a huge part of who we've become. And as I read your posts and see how family is dear to you, and then recognize the way that you are passing that along to your own children, but also in the workplace these days, there's so many families that are dealing with the stress not only of work, but family and healthcare and all those kind of issues. So it is incredibly relevant to look at where we've been impacted and grown. How do you see any of that in impacting the way that you lead and lead teams and encourage the people that you are working with?
I've always been fiercely protective of my family time as I've been a working mom. In order to have a 28-year career and have a 23-year-old child, I've just always been a working mom and have been sort of, very fortunate to have always worked for companies and people who had that same value,
Right.
And the woman that leads all of marketing at Bank of America, Anne Finucane, is somebody that I worked with very early in my career. And, she has a very sort of, bring the whole person to work. And, if you've got something to do with your family, then you do that, and when you're at work, she knows you're giving it your best. So, that has been a thread, working at Holliday, when I started to have kids, they had a daycare and they subsidized the payment. It was right around the corner from us. The Jack Connors, the CEO of Holliday at the time, wanted to know, how do I keep all these talented women? And that was, groundbreaking in the 80s to prop up a daycare and make sure that it was easy to come to work. So I've just been very fortunate. So I think I probably have always brought that to my teams as well. I just feel like if things aren't working for you at home, that's going to come into work.
Boy, is it.
Right.
What foresight
Right.
to have that vision in the 80s.
Right.
It's on the surface of what a lot of people are thinking about these days in the last decade. But things are so complex with home and work.
I know.
And because it's such a common struggle for so many people to feel dissatisfied with their day in and day out, aspects of their jobs, I think a lot of people become inured to the boredom or frustration, and consciously or not, they take on the mantra, just suck it up, Buttercup.
Oh, totally.
So tell me a bit about what led you up to your inciting Buttercup moment that brought you to asking, why is this not working for me anymore, and to make the changes you made.
Yeah, that's so funny. That suck it up, Buttercup. That's something that I thought I was living that and living it really well, right? And it turns out that, like, if you stuff something down or you pretend that something's not happening, you're not fooling anybody. Everybody can see it. I mean, I was kind of surprised. I have always really loved what I've done. Being in an advertising agency, as a young person and growing up, and being close to, amazingly creative people, helping them as a producer, helping them, bring their ideas to life. I just always felt like I had the best job at the agency. And then when I came to Bank of America, staying close to the creative product and still working with agencies, I still feel, and I feel again, that I have the best job at the bank. And so I was kind of caught off guard a couple of years ago when I suddenly was like, oh my gosh, like, is this really what I was put on earth to do? Kind of that, like, big question. And I realized through sort of, the digging I did in my year of whittling that for a very, very long time, I got my value, or I thought my worth, was sort of tied to being the person that could figure it out, being the person that could get it done, being the person that could help somebody else make their idea real.
Right.
And so to suddenly be in this place of like, I'm not sure this is what I want to be doing anymore. I don't know, like sometimes you turn 40 or you turn 50 and you just have that opportunity. I think that
right.
A lot of our lives are on autopilot, right? And it's like a survival mechanism. You're
exactly
a working mom, you go to work, you take care of your kids, you have a partner or a husband, and you can get to Friday night and be like, whew, what a week. And suddenly, like, you're saying, whoo, what a week every week, And so I think, the department that I was in got reorganized, and then I was like, okay, let me take this moment to really think about what I want to do and how I want to be, and I had been staring at the Kripalu magazine that comes and talks about all these amazing courses, and I had gone a couple of times with my mom, and the Whole Being Institute, that's run by Tal Ben-Shahar, Megan McDonough, and Maria Sarah, was offering this course at Kripalu for the 4th time. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to take it. I'm going to invest that time. Maybe that'll help me sort of dig my way out of this kind of malaise that I'm in. And my boss, Meredith, and the bank supported me.
Wow.
And I'm so fortunate that they did.
So take me through the 4 stages of the whittling process, and then a kind of a quick explanation of how someone can integrate them in her life on a daily basis. And then we'll cycle back through each of the parts, if you will, but just to give an overview and chip away at it.
Great. Okay. So, when I was telling everybody as I was going through it, Charles, like, I'm whittling away. I'm just whittling away the things that don't matter. Not like whittling away, certainly from a size perspective, but that, I was finding a way to not sort of worry about the things that didn't matter. And my very good friend Judy, my truth teller friend, everybody needs one.
Boy, don't they?
Said, you don't know anything about whittling. Stop telling people you're whittling. And so I got this book. And so the 4 stages of whittling, as I understand them, are preparing the blank, choosing the right tool, centering the blade, and working with the grain. And for me, that is not a how-to, because I have a strong opinion that how-tos don't work, that it's really a scaffolding, right? And it really takes daily practice and work to go through it. So preparing the blank, right, is sort of the metaphor for finding that piece of wood in the forest on your walk, or buying it in the store, and you are the one that can see the vision in that piece of wood. Michelangelo says, I chipped away until David came out, and that's sort of like whittling, right?
Right.
You're holding that piece of wood and you're chipping it away until the vision that you have for it comes out. And you are the vision in the blank, you as a person. And so how do you chip away at all of the crap that's, keeping you on autopilot, and really let yourself emerge? And the second thing in whittling is choosing the right knife or choosing the right tool. And you don't need a lot of fancy tools. You need one really sharp knife. And, for some people that could be meditation. For some people that could be exercise. It's just, what is it for you? What is that one thing that you are going to do every day that helps you? What is your tool? For me, it's walking, and I can solve almost anything by just going outside and walking. And I don't wear headphones. I walk, and that's my tool. And if I have something I need to think through, I walk. And then centering the blade. So in whittling, if your blade isn't centered, you can you reduce your leverage, or you lose your leverage, and reduce your power. And when I read that, I was like, holy crap, like reducing your power if you're not centered. Like, some people think, in order to be powerful, I have to be, I don't know, louder and stronger, and you don't. In order to be powerful, you just really have to be centered in who you are at your best. And the way that I learned to center was through a series of 30-day challenges that we were encouraged to do by the Whole Being Institute through the certificate program. And by doing something every day, you can change behavior. I did a lot of reading in the course about neuroplasticity, and I'm not a neuro person, but I understand in a layman's way that the only way to change behavior is to create a new neuronal pathway. And the only way to do that is to do the same thing every day for, some people say 24, some people say 28. The Whole Being Institute believes it's 30 days. And so doing that, the thing that, after all the 30-day challenges, the thing that helped me center the blade, Charles, was savoring the best moment of every day.
Right.
And
yes.
19 years of insomnia that I had battled with everything that's available went away.
Wow.
And then the last thing you do is work with the grain, and this is two parts, right? It's working, so that's the practicing that I was talking about, but with the grain, meaning with your authentic self. If you get a knife in your hand and a block of wood and you're not working with the grain and it slips, whittlers wear these fantastic gloves, but just as the metaphor, you can really hurt yourself. And for me, if I look back at 3 years ago when I was having this, is this really what I want to be doing? I had stopped bringing my authentic self to work. I had stopped sort of being me. I was just going through the motions. And when you do the practice and you work with the grain, and suddenly, like, here I am, I'm back again. It feels so much better. And people respond to you very differently and you don't know that until you're through it. So that's the whittling. That's my scaffolding.
What I love about this process that you're laying out is that it is not woo-woo.
Woo-woo?
It's based in science and good brain research. Everything that you're talking about as you're going through that is based in good science.
Yeah.
That it's all credible. And I think that's important, at least for me, because when people bring up notions of change that are not based in good, solid evidence, if you will, I'm fairly suspect. But everything that you've talked about, even, back down to, the process of doing a habit, at least what I have read and understand is that the brain lays down new pathways and then it wraps that pathway with myelin and keeps wrapping it and wrapping it and wrapping it until it becomes a super highway of thinking and habit. And once I latched on or understood that, I went, wow, there's power in this.
Right.
And there's science to back up that power.
There really is.
So I think that's critical. Walk me through the process of finding your core, because I think that's an important concept for people to understand. Wow. I mean, when I did that even briefly through your talk, it was extremely powerful for me.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, emotionally, it drew up stuff that I was surprised in the moment that came up.
Sure.
So walk back through that, and make it, walk it through personally, so we can see how it impacted you.
Sure. So, and as I share this, I just want to share with you, Charles, and with your listeners of the Creative Journey, that this is the work of Tal Ben Shahar. And so Tal, his whole reason for creating the Whole Being Institute was exactly what you just touched on, that positive psychology is based in science. And
right.
And so, he taught at Harvard and still holds, I think, the record for the most popularly attended class there on positive psychology.
Wow.
So this is his work. And for me, sitting in the first week immersion and doing the core ideal self exercise was transformative.
I bet.
And I think you might have heard, like at 3%, when I was helping people complete the exercise, there was this moment, right, in the audience where that.
Absolutely.
So the way that he taught us how to do it is, you can do this one-on-one with another person or in a small group of people, but each of you comes with a story of the person that you admire most in the world, and prepare, one or two stories and share them with each other. And as you're sharing your story, or as they're sharing theirs with you, you're jotting down those traits that you're hearing. Somebody's telling a story about their mother who survived cancer, and all that she was to them, and you're writing down, how courageous that person was and how loving that person. Well, what are the things that are sort of resonating for you through that story, and you write them down, and then you kind of have this list, of 10 or 15 values or traits that you've jotted down as you've heard the story, and then you circle the ones that resonate most for you. And then once you have that short list of the traits that really stand out for you, then you write "I am" in front of them. And when I did that and saw that, my list became, I am open, I have traditions, I am a positive force, I am grateful, I am a listener, I am myself always, and I am courageous. I was like, oh my goodness.
Wow. Yeah.
And then I wrote this sentence down at the bottom: I am the solution for me. And that is your core. And so what Tal will teaches us is that, if someone to say to you, Charles, what are your best traits? It's kind of like, whoa, sit down and try to write about yourself, and all of these blocks come up, right? You know who you are at your core, but you've lived a lifetime of, people sort of putting labels on you and limitations and telling you who you are. And so you build this sort of facade, and that's what you bring out into the world because you don't want, maybe you fear being found out. Like people tell me all the time how funny I am. And so if I go into the world and I'm not funny on that day, like, am I still being myself, right? Or people tell me,
right.
like, the one I hate the most is super mom. You're a super mom, and I feel like, well, what if one day I'm really awful and I yelled at I still...
The pressure that puts on you.
Pressure. So the only way to do that is to sort of do this exercise of reflecting what you admire most in someone else and turning it around and doing the I am statements helps you cut all the way back to the core. And so for me, when I started thinking about my core ideal self, tacked it up on the wall, thought about it every day, and then discovered sort of this scaffolding of whittling, I was like, that is the blank. And if that is my blank, then each day I now have a way to say, okay, today I wasn't as good a listener as I could have been. I've got a chance to do that better tomorrow, right? Instead of beating myself up, I was like, okay, I get a C on that today, and tomorrow I'll go for an A, and just having that core ideal self, that became my blank, that became my goal. And that's what I whittled around, and I'm still whittling. I call it my year of whittling, Charles, but it's kind of a lifetime.
Yeah.
One day at a time, lifetime process, right?
That's what it is. Well, it's funny as you were talking about the being the solution for yourself. I remember a line from one of your blog posts about the summer that your grandfather left home and grew up while he was traveling across the U.S. But the line from the post that I thought resonated with me, and it sums up your journey, is that, but it turns out that the answer was an inside job.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's carried through to the work you're doing now. So it's jumped.
Yeah. Isn't that great? And, my son, my 18-year-old recently came home from college. He decided he didn't want to be there. And I wrote about that in the post. And it's so funny. Like, I feel like how stories live inside us. That story of my grandfather is like one that we've told each other and held on to for so long, but all of a sudden I was compelled to find his letters because my son had come home, and I was like, he needs to know this story, because leaving college, you probably don't feel so great, and
exactly,
what am I going to do next? And so I really feel like everybody's got a story inside them, and everybody needs to tell that story because when you tell it, when you're like free with it and you tell it, it gives somebody else permission to say, oh, wow, yeah, that's me too, instead of this sort of image that we bring to the world. People have an idea of who we are, and sometimes it's the idea we want them to have. But if we're really honest and we tell our stories, and that's not only helpful to ourselves, but helpful to whoever's listening. And usually those stories are met with sort of love and kindness, and we fear that they'll be met with ridicule and something else.
Absolutely. Well, I think about at least the work that we're both involved in. Stories and narratives are a critical part of the business culture.
Yeah.
Especially these days, you can't swing a stick and not, hit somebody talking about, business narratives and telling your genuine story, to the point that I think people are beginning to not even listen to it anymore because it's just become another catchphrase.
Right.
But the more that I've really gotten deeper into the critical aspect of understanding who we are, not just as companies or brands, but individuals, and the leadership behind that and the work we're doing every day, I am astounded at how not only how critical important it is, but how we really ignore going into the deep stories that resonate with people as opposed to the facade or the stories that we put out there on the facade of who we are as brands and individuals, and how they're not those facades don't resonate and they're not making an impact. So that said, is that going back to those deep family stories and understanding how they are resonating in our lives, I think really are important.
Yeah.
To who we are and how we really show up in the world each day.
I mean, and it's a battle, I guess is the right word. But I mean, the world around us sort of values shiny and new and perfect, right? And so, if you're going to come out raw and rough and vulnerable, and as a parent, right? Like my child, I want to protect them. So, I sort of help them prepare for the day by putting their snow coat on or their hat and their mittens, and we do that emotionally too, right? We sort of put on this armor and go out into the world, because the world isn't going to welcome raw, rough, and vulnerable every moment,
Absolutely.
So I think, Charles, it is that. It's like, how can you bring your true self to work, to family, to wherever it is you're going to go, and survive with all that vulnerability.
Absolutely.
It's a daily question.
Well, it is a daily process, and to that point, to jump back into what you were talking about earlier, a lot of people struggle with how to make it a daily process.
Right.
I mean, we live in a culture in which there is a strong, bifurcation of work and self-care responsibilities. Mm-hmm. And I've been self-employed for 37 plus years, wow. And I still struggle with how to make that decision to walk away. I have the freedom to do it. I'm working, and I think a lot of days, all I have to do is just get up and go take a walk or take a break, and I don't do it. Mm-hmm. And when I talk with people who don't have as much leeway, they work in agencies or they work in places where they can't just jump up and head out. Right. It's even more of a challenge. What do you, out of this discovery and the process you've been going through, what are some of the daily steps, or how do you encourage people to work those daily steps, to do those routines that do chip away gradually at the blank, if you will, to make a difference? I mean, we're right at the start of a new year, and human beings want a quick fix, easy solutions. Right. So right. If you can share any insights about making those big changes by doing small steps every day.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm sorry to disappoint. There is no quick fix, right? There is no quick fix. It's I mean, that's why, I jokingly say, years of New Year's resolutions gave me nothing more than a really great January, right? Because I think that the beginning of the year, people, I'm going to lose 15 pounds. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to get more sleep, and whatever it is that somebody wants to do. And really, it's like, it should really be, I think, for the next 30 days, I'm going to eat better. Because that's that daily practice. And every day I'm going to eat better. And by the end of that 30 days, you'll have created a new ritual or a new habit. And so you'll eat better for the rest of the year, because that just has become the way you do things. And so I think it's doing something every day. And I use the tool of my notebook to record what I'm doing. And I probably will give myself a 30-day challenge every day for the rest of my life, because I have found that is, sort of how I'm built, and I did 30 days of good enough, Charles, and I am a perfectionist in recovery, right? Because that whole thing that you said about, when do I walk away? I'm self-employed. I keep my own hours. I say when something's done. When do I?
And it's never done.
It's never done. It can be never. So you have to say, like, okay, I'm going to practice getting to good enough and being comfortable with good enough. And,
right.
I think I had to do that. And there are some days now where I catch myself and say, is this good enough? And to be on the agency side of life, that is hard to do, because you are working for a client and on behalf of a client, and I think that creative people want to do their best just work all of the time. And so I think you have to be disciplined to know sort of what are the projects that are going to require 150% of my energy, and what are the ones that really I should be able to knock off with 60%. And having been both sides, agency and client, like I feel like it's a responsibility for us not to abuse that tendency in agencies to want it to be better than perfect. And you know, I try to be mindful of that when we're asking for work and giving assignments. But on a personal level, Charles, I feel like I had to practice getting to good enough in order to know when to walk away from something.
And how to learn that is a challenge that I'm not sure how to tell somebody without going through. As a recovering perfectionist as well, and always will be, I have to keep relearning it.
Yes.
But I remember a huge lesson relatively early in my career where I thought clients hired people who did great work and everything was perfect. Mm-hmm. And so that fit well with my image. And I was on an corporate industrial project and trying to make the images just, the photographs are just perfect. Mm-hmm. And the woman it was my client, at some point said, I have a child to pick up at 5:30. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's got to be done. Yeah. And as a non-parent, I was kind of going, but we're striving for perfection for you. And the lesson that I learned, and I hope I've learned, is that know what the needs of the people you're working for are, mm-hmm. and meet their needs as opposed to your needs. And again, it's not that I've not had to relearn that at times, but it was a huge lesson for me to realize that frequently we're working to our own perfectionism, not what the needs of the people who are paying us are. And that did help me shift at that point to ask deeper questions about what is it that you really need, want, and desire out of this before I interject my perfectionism.
Before I spin this up into perfect. Yeah.
Oh, my word. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Since a cornerstone of this show is about processes, can you share any shifts in how your processes and interactions with people have occurred since you've begun this journey?
Yeah, I have this great sort of visual memory of being at Kripalu, and Maria Sarah is one of the leads in the program, and she does this exercise where she takes out a big sort of whiteboard and she has people shout out all the things that really bother them, that really stress them out. And she calls that the swamp. And then she pulls another piece of paper up and she has, okay, now tell me all the things that you love, that are good in your life. And, I forget what she calls that, but, some of the same things are in the swamp that are in the good part.
Oh, that's funny.
Right? Like, people yell out my parents or my husband or my job, they yell it out both times, and then she shows them like it's part of, you have to sort of embrace it all. And I remember shouting out my Outlook calendar, like that causes me the most stress. And emails, early morning emails or emails from, maybe somebody at work that I'm struggling with or something. And then and so just like saying that out loud, like I had never really said that was part of my swamp. And so then you're asked to sort of solve, like, well, what are you going to do about those things that are in your swamp? How are you going to respond differently to them, kind of thing? And so the thing that I started doing was, if I would see an email or an Outlook calendar invite come for something that I wasn't looking forward to doing, or from someone that I was in conflict with, before I opened it, I would take 4 deep breaths, and then I would open the email.
Oh, that's good.
And that changed everything for me. And it like adds time into your day. I mean, it doesn't sound like 4 deep breaths adds that much time, but it does, right? Because we are in a responsive culture.
Yes.
And so I find if I forget to do that, then like you can feel the chemicals in your body shift in response to a nasty gram email that you might get,
Right.
Then you everything shifts in you. And so then you are sort of answering back with all of that bad energy, and so once I identified that truly was a part of my swamp, as Maria calls it, and then I developed a tool to deal with it, I was able to respond to something, not react to it. And that was a huge change in me. And people respond differently to you when you can respond with kindness to them, right? And
yes.
And so, people always say, hey, did the people around you change when you came back from Kripalu? And I said, I can't speak for people around me. I can tell you that I felt them differently with me. But that I think was because I was, maybe giving off a different kind of energy. So instead of this like high energy, get it done, let's just get it done, I was, maybe putting out, let's just work through this together. I think that's probably the biggest shift.
Yeah, and you bring up, I believe, a very important point, and that is that people, by and large, respond to the energy that we give them. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that a lot through the divisiveness that has been occurring over the last year around political discussions. Mm-hmm. But in so many areas as well, people seem to think that they can be argumentative or angry or frustrated, and that people are going to respond with this calmness or whatever. And I think, one of the things that I learned early on with both photographing people and doing filmed interviews is that if you want somebody to really be up and positive and are hyper energetic, if you throw that energy out there, people respond and their energy rises. But if the interview or the photograph or whatever you need, at least as I was working with them, needed, if I lowered it down and talked to them in hushed tones or quiet or drew it down, that people would respond that way. And I learned that just do that everywhere.
Right. Just do that everywhere. Exactly.
Is give people the energy that the situation calls for. And it is a way of both controlling the situation, if you will, without manipulating people. But it's also a great way to learn to listen, is to put the energy out there and then watch the response in such a way. So I believe you have hit on something that I think is critically important as both a process and a tool in managing energy.
Oh, I think in managing yourself and managing a family and managing a team at work, sort of being mindful of the energy that you're putting out, and how impactful it is as a leader to really be conscious of the type of energy that they're putting out is huge, and
absolutely.
I talk about, or I think a lot about, one of the learnings in positive psychology about, how can I ask the question in a more positive way? How can I zoom out and get a better perspective? And I now know as one of my tools to stop and say, okay, what question am I living in right now?
Yes.
And if I'm living in the question of why is this not working, instead of what worked well today, right? It's like just such a shift. And I do that, try to ask my kids that, what are you living in? What question are you living in? And it's like, instead of like, why are you thinking that way? Or why, that's, wrong-headed thinking or whatever. Like,
wow.
What question are you living in? It's such a different way of approaching it for me, and it really helps center the energy that is really, and then it's like, well, maybe I shouldn't even be living in this question at all, right?
Absolutely, yes. And as you were saying that, I think how would we respond to the question and the energy if somebody was bringing that to us?
Right.
Would our response be, oh, wow, yes, you're right, and I was wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. And you've just made that point so well. Please forgive me.
Yeah.
And most of the time, if somebody screams at us, I mean, I think from a child's perspective, you walk in the house and scream, why is your room a mess? You're always, leaving a mess. And what?
Yep.
No one's going to ever say, wow, you've just made such a cogent and thoughtful point. I'm going to get right on that right now, Mom.
Oh, yeah.
Instead, we get defensive instead of, asking a question the way that, we might respond to it. It's surprising.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Wow.
I mean, everybody in my house knows not even to talk to me until I've had dinner, right? Like, because, when I come home from work, I'm usually ravenously hungry.
Right.
And if they, and it doesn't matter how many breaths I take, if I get asked a question, I cannot respond correctly unless I've eaten. And so they just know that about me. And, I'm like, whatever question you have is going to get a no until I have dinner. So
That's right.
Just hold it.
That's right.
So I think it's like, that's just, all of this is really, really good, but you also have to make sure you're eating well and getting enough sleep. The basics are important too.
Yeah. Well, to that point, what are some of the specific processes or even tools? Because you've already been touching on some of those that you use in your daily life to get unstuck, meet deadlines, keep yourself on track. What are some of the mindsets, processes, tools? All those kind of wrap together to me.
Yeah.
In terms of daily life. Any others?
Well, I think that, I've shared a lot about, sort of like, making sure that I get a walk in, even if it's a 15-minute walk, making sure that I do that, and making sure that I used to sort of really think staying up very late at night, getting stuff done, was better than going to bed and getting a good night's sleep. And I just know that that's not what works for me anymore. So getting a good night's sleep.
Yes.
Right. It's
I'm with you.
So that's super important. I think, taking the breaths and, that I learned heart-mind coherence breathing, from a book called The Instinct to Heal, Curing Anxiety and Depression Without Medication. It's a great book. And so they talk about the mind, the brain, and the little brain, the heart, and connecting them through breathing, because all your emotions are in your heart, but they're you're thinking them. And so if you take a deep breath and you wrap your breath around your heart, and then blow it out, and you do it 4 times, and on the second, third, and fourth time, you're bringing to mind your favorite place on earth. Is a very calming, you can sort of then, okay, now I'm going to start over. So if I get stuck, I know now to do that. And it's probably a form of meditation. I probably have, I'm very like high energy, right? And I move all the time. And so to sit down and do something like that was foreign to me. Tried meditation for a long time and just didn't really get what I thought I would be getting out of it. But doing 4 heart-mind coherence breaths gives me the same sort of, okay, now I can start again, right? So I think that's one of my tools, Charles. And that's what I do before those emails and before I have to make a phone call or even before you and I started talking, I did that to get myself like, okay, I'm now going to talk to Charles. We're going to do this.
That's great. And Amy Cuddy
has
her power poses.
Her power poses, right?
I think are one of the strongest influences.
She's awesome.
Take a deep breath in a power pose and see if that doesn't
totally. Yep. I do that before I've spoken to people. I channel Amy Cuddy, and I just think that learning was that was awesome. She's awesome.
Absolutely. What are some of the practices or habits that are still in your life that are proving to be the most difficult to whittle away?
Oh, Charles. smoking cigarettes. I cannot get that out of my life. And I know that sounds so weak, and but if Obama can have one cigarette a day, I can too. I don't know what else to say. But it's sort of, I don't know what it is. It's this like crazy thing. I'm so good. I'm doing so good. I'm performing in so many ways. I'm just going to let myself have this cigarette. And I really wish I didn't do that. And I've promised myself that I would stop doing that. And so I will work on that. And I just have to practice what I'm talking about and get rid of it. But that's the thing that I haven't been able to whittle away. Thank you for asking.
Not that it's the healthiest thing to do, but also recognizing that we are human and that we're going to have some point of weakness.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to talk about and put out there, not living a facade, but being real and letting people see that, this is a struggle for me. And partly to that point, is there a place in your life where you continue to see imposter syndrome surface?
Every time I'm about to publish something on my blog, I do have that moment of, nobody wants to hear this, Kelly. Who are you to tell people what you think? You do have that sort of moment. I mean, I think one of my strengths has always been that I've been me, I've been who I am, sort of take it or leave it. And I think that I lost my way a little bit a couple of years ago, thinking that I don't know what I thought I had to be. But I feel like that is one of my core strengths, is that I am myself always. And so I don't know that I have any more of that veneer on. I need to cut through because I'm sort of putting myself out there in a pretty raw way right now. And I think the people that I feel like I have to maybe put a posture on have sort of faded away from my life, either by my choice or by theirs, right? Because when you're near somebody who's just putting it out there in a really raw and vulnerable way, if that's uncomfortable for you, you're not going to spend as much time with that person anymore. So I have felt a withdrawing from some, but I have a really strong group of, I have a strong family, I have a strong group of friends, both at work and at home. So I don't feel like I'm putting on the armor anymore. And
that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
To start moving to. You had mentioned earlier on a quote from Mary Karr about being paralyzed. And I just listened to an interview that she did with Krista Tippett on the podcast On Being. That was both hilarious and got to the point of this very deeply in what it means to keep showing up regardless of that fear.
Yes. She calls it the tarantula ego. Like the tarantula ego, I think she says, blocking me from whatever small thing is standing in line for me to say next. Like I think that is just one of my favorite quotes. I listened to that podcast with Krista Tippett as well, and Mary Karr. Wow, she's a force, man. And like, aren't we lucky to have those voices available to us to hear, right? Somebody that will say, I don't know Mary Karr, she doesn't know me, but her voice rings in my head.
Absolutely.
Right as I hit send, and
Absolutely.
I feel so fortunate to have that.
Well, in this age, there's no excuse to not be influenced by great thinkers and very thoughtful people who are also vulnerable out there as well. And I frequently, I feel like when I look back on my gratitude journal, which I've been keeping for a number of years at night, it seems like I say a lot of the same things.
Of course.
But frequently I'm writing, I am grateful for this podcast or this interview that I listened to today, or the shift in my thinking that came from that TED Talk or whatever it might be. And so there's really no reason not to be lifted up by these great people, because they are real people who are making those real struggles every day to hit send.
I know.
Regardless of how well known they may be, or to have a TED Talk or to be on stage.
Yeah.
I'm quite moved and encouraged by those pretty much on a daily basis.
We have a gratitude jar in our house, Charles, and it's in the middle of my living room, and there's little slips of paper and pens around it, and I give them out to people every year with the tags of the year on them. And so the idea is that you put in it what you're grateful for, on a given day or as you think about it. And then on New Year's Eve, we spill them out and we read them aloud to each other. And it's just such an awesome way to like relive the things that happened that year, the small, tiny moments that we were grateful for, or the big ones. And, like any thank you card my kids get or I get, we put in there and then we read them again at the end of the year. And we've been doing that now for a couple of years. And the sharing of gratitude as an exercise is such a, healing, uplifting thing to do.
It is. It's huge.
I'll send you one.
It's huge. I actually started mine a number of years ago, and I know a lot of people do it, and it's become trite for a lot of folks, but I think it's so significant. And I remember reading about them and thinking about them, but the inciting incident for me to start one was the story was about a woman who wanted to leave her husband, and she was angry. And so she started keeping a journal of all of his faults so that when she divorced and went to court, she would have this long list of faults.
Oh, my goodness.
And so that was my response. I went, oh, my gosh, how many of us but how many of us do that in a sense with people we don't like, or is it work or whatever? We keep kind of an unconscious list of
grievances,
things that we're disgruntled. It's the disgruntled journal in our mind. And if I remember the story correctly, it's that she did this and went to court, and she had this journal to start reading from, and the judge said, ordered her to go back and keep a happiness or he done right journal for a period of time, and to focus on the good things instead of the bad and see if that turned things around. And I don't remember how it turned out, but I thought, I was looking at my life at that point and thinking about a lot. I realized subconsciously I had a lot of things I was unhappy with, and I was keeping a log in my mind.
Right.
And not my wife, but on a lot of the things. And I thought,
sure,
the way to turn that around is to start writing the things I'm happy about or grateful for. Mm-hmm. So it was a very pragmatic reason for doing it.
Yeah.
And I find myself a lot of nights fighting it. And I think that the resistance gives me reason to write.
Yeah.
Is that do it anyway. And so anyway, and I know that you from preparation and conversations that you focus so much on gratitude.
Yeah. I'm a
I just wanted to get that in.
Gratitude geek. I call myself a gratitude geek. Yeah. And I love the repetition that you find in your journals, right? I mean, like you said, like sometimes you're writing down about the podcast or the conversation, and oftentimes, I'll write how grateful I am for my husband because he's such a calm force in my life. And I write that, many, many nights. And then I go back and to read that repetition.
That's huge.
Is amazing, right?
It is.
I think, and I sort of, to go back a year later to read that again and see what did I write about on March 19th last year, and if it's the same thing, like how lucky am I, right? And I'm a self-proclaimed gratitude geek. I really believe that what you have in your life, you have because you're grateful for it, and what's coming is because you're grateful for it. So thank you for offering to chat about gratitude with me.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
There are worse things in life to be a junkie about than gratitude. So
yeah, I guess.
I found that as we cut away the less important things and kind of pare down the unessential, that possibility, optimism slowly seeps in. Sometimes it just floods back in. What are some things that are giving you renewed hope for these days as a result of your process?
My son, Sean, who's now graduated college and working and living with his buddies in Boston. 5 years ago, he was doing a PG year at a private school, and he was invited to leave, which is euphemism for he was kicked out of school. And he came home, and I was devastated, as if I had been asked to leave school.
Right.
And it was it was devastating. And as we sort of repaired and figured out how to take the next step, and, he ended up going to college and thriving and is now working, I have learned through all of that and through this process that, you really have to take the long view. You can't sort of,
Yeah.
You have to be present in the moment and available, but sort of the devastation that I felt at the world ending, it really just didn't, and it isn't. And so then to have Ryan call me, 4 weeks ago and say, "Hey, Mom, I'm just not happy in college and I want to come home." I was able to sort of say, "Come home." And it wasn't devastating. It's just another sort of, people all say, "Oh, every kid has their own path and every kid makes their way." And, I feel like between Sean and Ryan, I went on this journey of whittling and learning, and they're probably like, "Well, thank God she did," because, she was nuts 5 years ago, and now she's very calm, and everything is good. Sean is, kids, I think kids, like, look, I don't think they're here to serve their parents, right? Like, certainly they make you happy and proud. And sometimes they make you sad and angry.
Right.
But they're not here for you. They're here for them. And that learning has made me a better parent, I think, and a better person, because it's the same can be true of friends that is said of your kids.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I think that's just the biggest, most tangible shift I can share.
I'm going to probably mess this up, but I've read this a couple of times that one of the greatest sources of misery is our own expectations. Once we remove our expectations from the calculus, it changes dramatically how we perceive it. And we just have to move our expectations of other people aside and just be there for people. And I think that story also is a reflection of probably of what would be your great-great-grandmother had when your grandfather left home to go across country as well. It seems like that may have skipped a generation or so, but it still resonated in ways as a lesson for you as well. And,
I think about, when my grandfather stole his father's train pass and jumped on that train in Fall River, Massachusetts in 1921, and his mother just didn't even know where he was at that point because he hadn't been able to say goodbye to her.
Yeah, and there's no internet.
No internet, no cell phone, no way, right? And still he was okay. Like,
that's right.
He, one shirt, one suit, $28, right? Which I don't even know what the equivalent would be now in 2016. Somebody smarter than me can do the math. But I asked my cousin Eric, I'm like, how about if next summer you and I retrace Grandpa's steps? That'd
be great.
And he's like, and live like a hobo? No, I'm not doing that. But I just, I think about my great-grandmother, and I think about me and my poor kids. They can't go to the store without me texting them, right? Like, that level of connectivity, I don't know that it's a good thing. Because I don't know that it allows us to really experience and grow the way we would if we didn't have that connectedness. But
absolutely, yeah. In reading your post, I thought, boy, what would it be like, now to think of somebody going and not having that connectivity with them in every moment of what they were doing. We just no comprehension whatsoever.
I know. My favorite moment was when he said, "I'm sad I can't get a letter from you, so I'm just going to assume that all is well."
Right.
I was just like, that is awesome.
What else can you do?
Right.
Yeah. What is something that you believe in the core of your being to be true that most other people probably won't agree with you on?
I do have this feeling that it will all be okay, right? Like, I know that in the core of my being, and I don't know if that's because of my life experience, right? Like, and when I say it'll all be okay, I don't mean like it'll all be okay and with perfectly set white tablecloth and the sun shining and flowers. And, what I mean is that, you go through things in your life and you come out of them and it really is okay. It might be different, but it's okay. And,
right.
When somebody that I know loses somebody close to them, I always sort of think, oh God, they just don't know what they, they're in the thaw right now. Like, people know to bring casseroles, and they're going to the funeral and they're shoring them up. And, I remember having this experience where I called across the hallway to my sister one night, probably about 2 months after she had died, and my parents had gone out for the first time. And I called across the hallway to her. I used to call across the hallway to her all the time when they would go out. And then she would call back if she was awake, and I would go into her room. And so there was one night I called across the hallway, and she didn't answer, obviously.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, that's what dead means. I was a 9-year-old, and that's what dead means. She's never going to call back to me. And that's when, I really started to cry and grieve for her. And so I think that experience, and then sort of being okay and living my life and having my parents and now my children, like, I do have a very strong belief that no matter what happens, it's all going to be okay. And I think there are people very close to me in my life, and if they ever listen to this, they'll know who they are, that wouldn't agree with me on that get caught up in things not being okay and being devastating, and get sort of spun up in that for a while. And so might not believe that as strongly as I do. That is an amazing question, Charles. That is my answer today, but I will now perseverate on that question for the rest of the day.
That's an incredibly wise and thoughtful view. And I think that comes with age and struggle.
Totally.
It seems that what most of us want is not to have struggle or strife or challenge, but those are the times that bring the wisdom.
Mm-hmm. We learn more from failure than we do from success, right? And
far more.
I mean, absolutely. And when you're going through it, it's just so miserable sometimes that
we can't see our way to the other side.
Oh, and plus, if somebody ever said to you, oh, hey, everything happens for a reason, or, you'll be so much stronger. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Like, no one wants to hear that when they're going through it.
Oh, not in the moment.
Right?
Not in the moment.
But it's a cliche because it's true, right? That's what cliches are. They're these annoying truths.
Absolutely. But having the compassion and empathy to know when not to speak them.
Yes.
In that moment.
Yes. To just sit there. Like you said, just sit there and be with a person.
Yeah. Hold that space to be with them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that wisdom comes with time and experience.
And knowing what you need.
Yeah. You've talked a lot about books and the great influence that they've had on you.
Yeah.
What are a few that have impacted or affected you most, and anything that may have made a difference to you?
Yeah. A Hidden Wholeness by Parker Palmer. And Let Your Life Speak, I think it's called. There are 2 books. I have one of them in my bag all the time right now. And they're not like cover-to-cover books. They're like dog-eared, and I go back and I reread. And, I think that whole idea that Parker talks about, of living the divided life. Parker, I talk about him as if I know him. That idea of, trying to merge to be whole and accept everything about yourself, rather than trying to be something you're not. Like that is a fascinating idea to me. And it's sort of the same idea as Tal Ben-Shahar's work on sort of, who are you at your core? Those 2 things are not very far off. Those are huge. And the Instinct to Heal was an amazing book that I read. And then I have this Pema Chodron pocket guide that I read every morning. And I just open it up to whatever page, and usually it helps me sort of ground my day and start my day. I like to start my day with a quote, and then looking at my core ideal self, and then thinking about sort of what am I going to look forward to today. And so those are the 3. My favorite book as a kid was The Count of Monte Cristo,
right, by
Alexander Dumas. And I just love that story. And it sticks with me, the story of him being sort of wrongfully imprisoned and escaping, and I don't know why it's coming to mind right now, but it is, and and it must be because of the whittling and the emerging. It must be someplace in my mind trying to get to me.
Yeah.
It was my favorite book as a kid. I read it and reread it and reread it.
Yeah. I think when those things surface, they can have a big impact on other people that, I'm at that place right now as well. So,
yeah,
absolutely.
I guess so. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there someone you know who is outside of the spotlight but doing something important that's having an impact that the world should know about?
Yes. There's a woman that I met in the Certificate for Positive Psychology class. She was a TA, and her name is Catherine Flavin. And she and another woman run a group called Thrive Leadership, and they do this work called Leader Moms, and they're sort of talking about the integration of highly engaged, successful women who are successful at work and highly engaged as moms, and what are the commonalities in both of those things. And they've done some survey work, and they do a lot of work with corporations to sort of highlight and celebrate the leader mom qualities, because they really believe there's a lot there for people to understand. And Catherine is a mentor of mine, and I think her work is amazing, and I think more people should know about her.
Good.
And the other person that comes to mind, Charles, is a woman named Demaine Davis. I met Demaine 28 years ago, my first day at Hill Holliday, and she's a writer and film director, and I find her to be incredibly talented, and she's got stories that need to be told, some that have been told and need a bigger audience. And I would love to shine a light on Demaine and Catherine.
Good. Well, their information, to find them, can be in the show notes, as well as the books that you talked about.
Thank you.
My pleasure. What do you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered as someone who wasn't afraid to tell her story. I want to be remembered because I raised great kids, or was a good mom, and I guess I would want to be remembered as somebody who was true to herself, who was nice to be around, and who was kind and loving. I mean, I think that that's the kind of atmosphere that I want to have in my home, and so I hope that that's what people remember about me. But I've never actually thought, what do I want to be remembered for? There's a lot of questions, Charles, that I'm going to be pondering for quite some time.
They're not small things.
No.
Is there any one thought that you'd like to leave our community with that you believe could make a difference in their lives that we've not already touched on?
Being comfortable in your story and sharing it is so important. But I think what's most important is sort of doing the work to figure out who you are at your core, and then giving yourself the permission to be that is what I would want for everybody. The place and the comfort to be who you are, and to be sort of proud of that. I want my kids to know how good it feels to bring your true, authentic self out into the world, and that, what a shame it would be if they didn't, because what a loss for me if they didn't bring their true gifts out. And I want that for everybody.
Good stuff. If folks want to connect with you, what places are best?
Oh, thank you, Charles. They can look at myyearofwhittling.com and subscribe to the blog, or follow me on Facebook at My Year of Whittling. On Facebook, they can find me there and sign up to like the page. And for the subscribers, I do 30-day challenges with them if they want to sign up to do that, or just follow me at either one of those places. And I'll let you know if I'm speaking someplace, either on the blog or on the Facebook account.
Kelly, thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
It's been a treat for me.
This has been wonderful for me and thought-provoking, and I really appreciate that.
Thanks for listening to The Creator's Journey. If you enjoyed our theme music, the name of the song is You've Got a Home by Krista Wells. The Creator's Journey is published the first and third Sundays of each month, except for July and December. If you enjoyed the show, I would appreciate having you go to iTunes and subscribe. While you're there, if you give us a favorable rating and review, it'll make a huge difference in helping a newcomer easily find it. You can find links to today's guests, the people and books we talked about, and email me with your wonderful thoughts, all at thecreatorsjourney.com. I want to thank Yodelist for sponsoring this episode of The Creator's Journey. Yodelist is an interactive marketing platform for people in the creative world. With a vetted database of contacts from across the industry, Yodelist helps photographers, illustrators, creative directors, designers, producers, stylists, and many others to locate potential clients and gives them the tools to make those connections happen. If you want to find out how Yodelist helps creative people find one another for work, just go to yodelist.com. Today's podcast is also brought to you by audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/TCJ. There are over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.